I never thought I'd see the day I'd stand in front of my own ranch gate and not be able to walk in. A cold steel gate erected overnight, a threatening sign from the HOA, and an unspoken message, "You're not welcome here anymore." But what they didn't know was what was coming next. They thought they were putting up a fence. What they actually built was a stage. Because the moment they tried to block me from my own land, I turned that land into something untouchable, the very place where my daughter's dream would start to bloom. My name is Jake Turner, 43 years old, former Marine, now a single father and the legal owner of a 15-acre plot of land about a 20-minute drive outside Flagstaff, Arizona. I'm not wealthy, I don't have power, but I'm proud of two things: the land my father left me, and my daughter Ellie, 17 years old, a kid with a dream to study architectural design. 3 months ago, on what was supposed to be just another calm Sunday, a day I planned to take Ellie out for breakfast in town, I saw something that made my blood boil. A brand new steel fence stretched from the northeast tree line all the way to the western canal, blocking off the only trail that led to my ranch, the only road my beat-up Chevy Silverado could take to reach our land. I slammed the brakes right there on the dirt path. Ellie sat next to me, her headphones still on, but she'd already looked up and stared out the window. "Dad, what is that?" she asked, frowning. I opened the door, stepped out, and walked the length of the newly built fence. Dead in the center of the iron gate was a bold, glaring sign: "Property of Ridge Meadows HOA, no trespassing unless a member of HOA." I'd heard of this HOA before. Ridge Meadows was a fancy subdivision that had sprung up about 5 years ago, right up against the edge of my land. Tennis courts, pool, even an outdoor amphitheater facing west. And from what I'd picked up at the gas station chatter, the person running the HOA was a woman named Karen Whitmore, rumored to be the widow of some rich lawyer from Scottsdale who had moved here to elevate the community. I dialed the number listed on the sign. A cold robotic voice answered, asking me to leave my name and the reason for my call. I didn't. I hung up and called the county sheriff's office. "You're saying they put up a fence blocking access to your land?" the deputy asked, a little skeptical. "That's exactly what I'm saying. This trail has existed for over 60 years. My father used it. My grandfather used it. They can't just block it without so much as a warning." "I hear you. But if that's HOA property, they may have rights to control access, unless you can prove that road lies within your parcel." I let out a dry laugh. "I've got land, surveys, the deed, and property tax statements. You think I'm making this up?" "No, sir, I'm not saying that. We'll send someone to check it out." But I knew how this would go. In a small town, money and connections speak louder than facts. I looked over at Ellie. She was leaning against the truck door, eyes uneasy. "What are we going to do, Dad?" I took a deep breath. "We're going to play by their rules, but this time they're going to pay for it." That night, after bringing Ellie home and having a lazy dinner of baked pasta leftovers, I sat in my office alone, flipping through the dusty paperwork my father had left behind. In an old leather-bound notebook, I found a hand-drawn sketch of the ranch layout, and just as I'd expected, the trail was entirely within our legal boundaries. In fact, it was the only access route to the western section of Ridge Meadows, the same area where the HOA regularly held fairs, weddings, and community events. An idea sparked, a wild one. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If they wanted to block my road and take control of it, then I'd charge them rent, and not just a token fee. I'd turn what they called community property into a personal revenue stream. Totally legal, just a lease agreement, except flipped. The next morning, I drove down to the local law office, the same one my dad used to visit, where attorney Laura Reyes, a sharp and well-respected real estate lawyer of Mexican descent, still practiced. When I told her everything, laid out the maps and photos of the fence, she raised an eyebrow. "Jake, If you've got clear ownership and can show they're using your road for community access, then this isn't just about a lease. This could be considered encroachment. So we can make them pay just to use what's already mine? Laura smiled. Not only can you should. That night, I called Ellie down to the living room. I've made a decision. I said, laying the plan out on the coffee table. You're going to have college tuition. No loans, no compromises, no settling for cheaper schools. We're going to use HOA money to fund your dream. Her eyes widened. You mean make them pay? I nodded. Exactly. Tuesday morning, I returned to attorney Laura Reyes's office with a detailed plan in hand, and a strange sort of excitement I hadn't felt in a long time. For years, my life had been about fixing tractors, keeping the ranch from falling apart, and saving every dollar I could for Ellie. But today, I wasn't just a landowner anymore. I was launching a counterattack. Laura carefully reviewed the diagram I'd brought, a layout of the blocked trail, the exact position of the HOA's fence, and the event lawn area that clearly relied on crossing my land for access. After 15 minutes of quiet reading, she looked up. We're going to send them a formal letter, she said, demanding they remove the fence within 7 days or sign a lease agreement for land use at the rate you specify. If they don't respond, we file. I nodded. And the lease rate? She smiled. How high do you want to go? I thought. For a moment. $1,000 a month for access, plus $500 per event they hold on that portion. Laura raised an eyebrow. That's pretty reasonable. I think they'll dismiss it, which is exactly what we want. If they underestimate you, they'll slip up. 3 days later, the letter was hand-delivered to Ridge Meadows HOA headquarters. It was polite, filled with federal and Arizona state statutes regarding private property rights, complete with photographs, maps, and a response deadline. A formal way of saying, pay or see you in court. I expected a courteous phone call. What I got instead was an email, exactly at 10 a.m. the next morning, from the HOA's legal assistant, signed by Harold B. Simons, Mr. Turner. We acknowledge receipt of your letter. However, the Oakview Ridge HOA strongly disputes your claims of exclusive property rights over the access road in question. The HOA has maintained and improved the path for over 5 years, and thus claims established easement by prescriptive use. We decline your offer to lease the land and suggest you drop this baseless demand. Sincerely, Harold Simons Legal Counsel, Ridge. Meadows HOA laughed out loud. Easement by prescriptive use. They were actually trying to legalize land encroachment by claiming prolonged use. That was one of the oldest tricks in the book, and exactly the kind of move I'd anticipated. I forwarded the email to Laura. An hour later, she called back, her voice calm but razor-sharp with energy. We've got them, Jake. They just admitted, in writing, to using your land without permission or contract for years. Not only are they not denying the encroachment, they're doubling down on it. I nodded. So what's next? We sent a second letter, this time with a final offer before litigation. I'll also include a retroactive bill for 5 years of unauthorized use, plus the events. How much? Roughly $75,000. Nearly spit out my coffee. Trust me, Laura said. They'll either scoff, ignore it, or lawyer up, which is perfect, because we'll escalate this to the local court, where their HOA name means nothing. The next week brought a series of strange behaviors from the HOA. One afternoon, I spotted 2 men in business attire standing along the fence, pointing and jotting notes at the access trail, clearly HOA suits. The following Monday, Ellie burst into the kitchen, holding her phone. Dad, look at this, she said, pulling up TikTok and showing me a video, secretly recorded during an HOA meeting. In the clip, a blonde woman who was unmistakably Karen Whitmore was angrily declaring, "He's extorting the HOA. Some ex-Marine wants $1,000 a month just to drive on a dirt road? This is an HOA. We will not be bullied by a man living in a run-down farmhouse. Applause broke out from the front of the room, but I noticed the faces in the back. Uneasy, worried. No one wanted a legal battle, and they definitely didn't want their names tied to a property dispute scandal going viral online. I looked at Ellie. We're making them lose control. 3 days later, Laura got a call from an unfamiliar number. The HOA's attorney wants to meet, she said. Nothing official, but they're getting nervous. Good, I replied, setting my coffee down. Because I've got a new proposal too. What is it? I smiled. Raise the rent. Less than 48 hours after Laura told me about the informal meeting, I spotted the silver Lexus SUV parked just outside my ranch gate. 3 people stepped out. Harold Simons, the lawyer who preferred convoluted jargon over common sense. Karen Whitmore, the current president of the HOA, blonde hair dyed to defiance, Gucci sunglasses, and a third man I hadn't seen before, tall, dressed in a slate blue suit with a face as cold as dry ice. I stood on the porch holding a glass of iced tea like it was just another easy afternoon, not the moment when they thought they'd negotiate land rights with a stubborn old rancher. Mr. Turner, Harold nodded, his voice as fake formal as it gets. Thank you for your time. I've got all the time in the world, I said, turning to Karen. But I'm sure you folks are busy, closing off driveways and raising fences, I assume. Karen didn't respond. The third man stepped forward, extending a hand. Thomas Grant. I represent the Oak Ridge Development Board, a long-term partner of the HOA. I'm here to seek a reasonable resolution. I shook his hand, cold as freezer steel. We sat under the porch awning. Laura wasn't present, but I activated the voice recorder on my smartwatch, just in case. We believe there may have been some misunderstanding regarding land access, Thomas began. However, we'd prefer to settle this peacefully rather than escalate to court. Karen interjected. You should know that your land lease proposal is unreasonable. That road has always been maintained by us. With HOA funds or personal money, I shot back. Because if it's HOA funds, that means you've been spending resident money to maintain a path you don't legally own. Harold cleared his throat. We have evidence that the HOA has used that road continuously and without obstruction for over 5 years. That constitutes a claim for prescriptive easement under state law. I smirked. Oh, I've read the law, and I also happen to know that during those 5 years my grandfather filed 3 formal complaints with relevant parties, all regarding land encroachment. I have copies. There was no continuous, uninterrupted use. There were disputes. Which voids your easement claim. The air went still for a moment. Then Thomas said, We understand. And to show goodwill, we're prepared to make a fair purchase offer for your land. I crossed my arms. How much? Karen smiled. $200,000, triple its current market value according to an independent appraisal. I almost spit out my iced tea. Let me get this straight, I said. You block the only road I use every day? Try to hit me with $75,000 in made-up fines, and now offer to buy the very land you've secretly been using to throw wedding parties? Karen clutched the strap of her handbag. We're offering you a way out. I stood, leaning on the porch railing. This isn't a way out. It's a gilded bear trap, and I'm not dumb enough to step in it. Thomas remained calm. If you refuse, we'll file for easement rights and proceed with penalty enforcement. I shrugged. Go ahead. But fair warning, I've installed cameras around the entire area. I've got evidence of the HOA hosting at least 17 commercial events on my land over the past 2 years, not to mention the illegal fencing. If you sue, I'll counterclaim. If you threaten, I'll publish the data. I pulled out my phone and played a hidden camera clip. Footage from this past spring showing people setting up backdrops, speakers, and a banner reading Oak Ridge Spring Gala, sponsored by Ridge HOA. Karen's face went pale. Harold went quiet. Thomas stared at the screen, then raised an eyebrow. How many clips like that do you have? he asked. I call it my seasonal HOA collection, I said. A different event for every season, a different trespass every time. Karen stood abruptly, clearly losing her composure. Who do you think you are, making demands like this? I looked her dead in the eye. I'm the landowner, the legal property holder, and the man who's about to turn your favorite event lawn into a tractor lot, unless we lease the land, Thomas said, his tone a mix of concession and challenge. I smiled. My attorney will send over the contract, $2,000 a month, paid quarterly in advance. As for the past, I'm still deciding. Could be back charged, could go public. Depends on how you want to end this. They left in silence. Just me, my glass of iced tea, and the unmistakable feeling of a checkmate. After that front porch meeting with Karen and the HOA board, I realized I wasn't just up against a few greedy individuals. I was fighting a system built on fear and silence, and that right there was their biggest weakness. So I decided to start with the people right next door. That Saturday afternoon, I hosted a free farm hangout, inviting every nearby resident to swing by. It wasn't some stiff HOA meeting with folding chairs and PowerPoint slides. I set up wooden tables, poured lemonade, laid out cookies, and let the goats roam freely in the yard. My daughter Ellie even painted a sign that said, "Farm Day, come pet a goat and get the tea." I figured maybe a few families would show up, but by 4 p.m., over 40 people were standing in my front yard, and it was pretty clear nobody came just to pet a goat. "You're the guy they fenced off?" a blonde woman asked. "We heard something about security maintenance, but didn't really get it." "Yeah," I smirked. "Security maintenance that involves padlocks and a no trespassing sign, very welcoming." An older gentleman named Walter, must have been pushing 70, nodded slowly. "I've lived here 12 years, never seen anyone dare stand up to Karen. They once fined my wife for planting chrysanthemums in the wrong shade." "And has anyone ever won a case against them?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, but no one's ever gathered evidence like you have either." That's when I played my ace card, the outdoor screen. I hooked it up to my phone and played a short video, clear footage of HOA events hosted on my land, complete with dates, crowd counts, signage, and even a welcome speech from Karen at the Oak Ridge Spring Nights Gala. No one said a word for a few seconds. Then someone muttered, "How long have they been doing this?" "I've got proof of at least 2 years," I answered. "And now they've fenced off my access road and slapped me with a $75,000 fine, as if I'm the one trespassing on my own land." A woman in the back chimed in, "I got fined $150 once for putting up Christmas lights too early. If I'd known Karen was throwing private parties on stolen land." "And me," a burly guy added, "I got hit with a $400 fine for adding a wooden stair step without permission. But who approved all those outdoor stages? What rules were they following?" The mood shifted fast, from curiosity to anger. Folks who had silently endured now started asking real questions. Not just to me, but about the very foundation of how the HOA was running this place. I seized the moment. "I'm not here to lead some uprising or overthrow Karen," I said. "But I'll be damned if I let someone steal my land and then charge me rent for it. I'm going to fight this, and I've got the evidence." A young man, looked like an engineer, called out, "If you've got proof, I'll sign a group petition." "We should form a watch group," a mother of 2 suggested. "Something outside the HOA, a resident oversight committee," I smiled. "We could call it the Backyard Justice Club." Laughter rolled through the yard, but I knew that wasn't just a joke. It was the first spark of something real. Within a week, we had over 60 households sign a petition demanding the HOA disclose financial reports, event approval procedures, and explain why private land was used for public functions. We delivered the petition to the HOA's attorney, posted a copy at the neighborhood entrance, and, following Laura's advice, sent a copy to City Hall. Karen's response, a letter printed in red ink accusing me of inciting residents, threatening, neighborhood order, and negatively impacting property values. Attached, a new fine, $100,000 for abuse of community space. I pinned the fine to the chicken coop and let the hens protest it with their natural talents. Now, it wasn't just me. The entire community saw clearly who was really disrupting the peace around here. When I pinned that $100,000 violation notice to the chicken coop, maybe I went a bit far. But watching Karen turn red as she drove by, that was a perfect shot of dopamine. But I knew I couldn't stop at just exposing their wrongdoing. Outrage spreads quickly, sure. But to truly take back control, I needed to turn damage into opportunity. Like my grandpa used to say, if they block your path, redraw the map. So I started thinking, if the HOA had built fencing across my land and the entire neighborhood had to pass through that road to access the main highway, didn't that mean I technically owned their only exit? I pulled out the property plat and confirmed the boundary lines. Just like I remembered, the road they referred to as Oak Ridge's access point ran through nearly 300 meters of land I inherited. They'd never asked permission to use it. No contract, no easement, nothing. I called Olivia, my lawyer, best friend, and strategic brain from college. "You're telling me," she said, surprised, "the whole HOA's been using your land to get in and out, rent-free?" "Not just rent-free," I said. "They blocked my gate, fined me, and threw parties on it." "Then it's time," she grinned, "to start charging toll." Thus, the land lease fee was born. No, I didn't set up a California-style toll booth. I know my limits. But I sent out an official notice to the HOA and each household. Starting the 1st of next month, the road cutting through my land would be subject to an infrastructure access fee of $20 per household. The rate was based on actual land usage and came in lower than their monthly trash collection fee. I even hired a local designer to create a logo. Morgan Access Pass. We keep the path, you keep the peace. And it wasn't mandatory. I simply stated, if they declined to pay, I reserved the right to limit access through my land. Under state law, landowners can do this so long as emergency access isn't obstructed, which I had already confirmed with the local infrastructure office. Karen responded exactly as expected. A week later, I got a letter from the HOA's lawyer, rejecting my outrageous demand and accusing me of disrupting community access. I replied with a one-line email. "This isn't a demand. It's a lawful lease fee for private property usage. If necessary, we can let the court verify ownership." Attached were certified plats, a seal from the county recorder's office, and a pre-drafted lease agreement with a signature space for each household. No threats, just a very commercial offer. And then, something unexpected happened. People started signing. The first was Mr. Walter, Oak Ridge's unofficial gatekeeper. He sent me a handwritten envelope with a signed lease and a $20 bill. I'm too old for more drama. If $20 means not hearing the HOA scream at me every week, it's worth it. Then came a young couple, Andrew and Maya, who had just moved in. They even brought a basket of homemade muffins. "Thanks for standing up for our rights," the note read. Within 10 days, I had 36 signed agreements, over half the total homes in Oak Ridge. I was pulling in over $700 a month, enough to cover legal fees, road maintenance, and the rest. I funneled straight into a scholarship fund I called Ellie's Future Fund. That's right, my daughter's dream, her creative classes, summer abroad programs, even college tuition, all funded by the fence Karen built. Some called it sweet revenge. I called it logic. I didn't build a wall. I built a revenue stream. I didn't scream about justice. I mailed receipts. Karen may hate me, but I know this much. She hates losing control even more. And now every time the HOA holds a meeting to discuss security gate improvement budgets, they have to file a request through my lawyer's office. This story isn't over. But for the first time in HOA history, they had no idea what to do with me. I knew it wouldn't stop at lease agreements. Not because I'd provoked anything, I never crossed a legal line. But for someone like Victoria Maddox, the HOA president and self-proclaimed queen of the bylaws, me flipping the board was a personal insult. And when she's hurt, she doesn't react. She retaliates. 3 weeks after I sent out the first round of lease invoices, I received a thick envelope from a high-profile city law firm. Notice of lawsuit from Oak Ridge HOA for obstruction of public access, land seizure, and abuse of ownership. I sighed and folded the letter. The real battle had begun, but I didn't rush into a counterattack. I called Olivia. "This," she scoffed after reading the filing, "is the dumbest move they've ever made. They just admitted the road they're using is on your land. Any argument about public access falls apart unless you legally dedicate it to the town." I nodded. "Still, this could drag out in court." "Exactly. That's the point. Wear you down. Make you quit." I was ready to stay in the fight, but I didn't expect the first counterstrike to come from my daughter, Ellie. She's only 14. Smart, sharp, and blessed with a creative mind she inherited from her late mother. A free-spirited artist. I'd always tried to nurture that, but I didn't see this coming. One quiet Saturday afternoon, Ellie walked up to me with an idea that stopped me cold. "Dad," she said, "why don't we open a creativity station?" I blinked. "A what?" "I've been thinking. This land isn't just grass and fences. We could make it something fun, a place where people can come to draw, build models, and make videos. They'd pay an entry fee, not rent, just a creative experience. And it just so happens to sit exactly on the path the HOA uses." My jaw dropped. "You thought of this yourself?" "I sketched it out last week." She handed me a notebook, filled with blueprints, an outdoor gallery, a craft tent, a giant Lego station, a mini movie corner, even a storytelling nook. I looked at my daughter. In my head, the word checkmate rang like a bell. 1 week later, Creative Crossing, Ellie's chosen name, opened with a soft launch for friends, neighbors, and a few curious Oak Ridge kids. Instead of a fenced-off dirt road, the land bloomed with color, balloons, easels, and the laughter of children. We didn't call it a toll. We called it a Creative Experience Pass, $5 per visitor, free for kids under 6. Anyone passing through to reach the HOA, by foot or by car, now walked a path lined with doodles, funny quotes, and models that made you laugh out loud. They weren't required to pay, but then Ellie would run up, smiling, and say, "Want to add one line? Just one little doodle? Who could say no?" 3 days later, the HOA sent an emergency letter accusing me of exploiting a minor to pressure the community. I simply posted a picture of Ellie, grinning ear to ear beside a sign that read, "Ellie's Creative Zone, Judgment-Free Access." The neighbors started switching sides. An old lady who once complained about my chickens now brought her grandkids for Watercolor Day. A former by-the-book HOA loyalist snapped selfies beside Ellie's Lego model of City Hall. And one day, I overheard something that warmed my heart. Morgan's Place is the only fun part of this HOA. When we were summoned for a preliminary court mediation, the HOA lawyers showed up with thick files, but they weren't prepared for Ellie's surprise play. An application to register Creative Crossing as a nonprofit educational initiative, with community support and property tax relief. Olivia leaned over to me and whispered, "Your kid just defended your property with art." I whispered back, "She gets it from her mother." The mediation ended with no ruling, but the judge recommended both parties find a peaceful resolution and officially noted, "The disputed road appears to be clearly on the defendant's property." As the defendant, I offered a slight smile, while Victoria sat frozen like a statue, and Ellie quietly sketched a cartoon of their lawyer across the table. A week later, the local news aired a story. 14-year-old outsmarts HOA with art project and wins big. When the anchor asked Ellie, "Do you have anything to say to the HOA?" She smiled sweetly and said, "I just want people to know that art can open doors, even the ones that are locked." Ellie pulled a sketchbook from her backpack, pages filled with colored pencil doodles, haphazard but surprisingly detailed. It was a blueprint for a farm creativity station, a place where people could learn painting, crafting, model building, even film YouTube in the countryside, complete with a selfie booth next to a haystack. I stared at her, both stunned and deeply moved. "Ellie, you came up with all this?" She nodded proudly. "Of course. If people keep walking across our land without paying, why not turn it into something valuable?" I burst out laughing. Not mockery, the kind of laugh a father lets out when he realizes his daughter has just come up with a solution it would take a room full of gray-haired lawyers weeks to think up. The very next morning, Ellie and I got to work. We put up a massive wooden sign right on the stretch of land. The HOA had taken over. Ellie's Creativity Station, entry 10, 50% off if you wear floral. Beneath the sign, an arrow pointed to the old barn we were converting into a crafting classroom. No exaggeration. In just 3 days, we earned nearly $300 in experience fees from kids around the neighborhood curious about this quirky new space. Some moms who brought their kids just to check it out ended up staying for hours, making dried flower crowns with Ellie. Of course, the uninvited guests showed up too. That Wednesday afternoon, while Ellie guided kids through painting corn kernel mosaics, I saw Victoria Maddox, HOA president, striding in with Harold Mitchell and a legal rep, faces taut and humorless. "I believe you're in violation of the zoning code," Victoria snapped, eyes flicking toward our price sign. "This area isn't licensed for commercial activity." I smiled as warmly as possible. "Oh, Mrs. Maddox, this is a community educational effort, not a business. We're just collecting material fees. Think of it like a pop-up outdoor learning workshop." Harold frowned. "And you're holding this workshop directly on a shared access path?" I feigned surprise. "Really? I thought this was private land, especially since your office previously refused to acknowledge it as a public easement. Or are we changing that stance now?" Victoria clenched her designer bag strap. "Don't play word games with me. We'll be reporting this to the city." "Please do," I nodded. "We're actually preparing to invite local school groups for weekend visits. I'd welcome the extra oversight." Victoria turned on her heel without another word, but I knew she wasn't done. Sure enough, 2 days later, I received a formal notice demanding the closure of our unlicensed educational facility. But with Olivia's legal expertise, we responded with documentation showing this was an occasional, community-based, non-commercial creative activity. Olivia even attached a list of prior HOA-hosted events, complete with ticket prices, booths, and raffles, held on the very same land. "Same laws, different enforcers," she said, barely concealing her satisfaction. "They just stepped on their own precedent." While the HOA scrambled for a new excuse to shut down the creativity station, Ellie had another idea. A mini creativity contest themed "If You Lived on a Farm." Contestants had to build cardboard models. And of course, the event took place right on the contested HOA path. On contest day, over 40 people showed up. Kids giggled beside tiny barns, chicken coops, and hayloft models. Parents took photos, live-streamed, and posted online with the hashtag #CreativeFarmTrap. What started as a tense conflict turned into the neighborhood's new weekend destination. People began to see that this land wasn't just about property. It was about ideas and about how one dad and his daughter turned pressure into joy, and the HOA? Whispers spread that Victoria was losing support. The board grew divided. A few members began asking tough questions. "What are we doing? Suing a kid for teaching crafts in her dad's backyard?" I didn't say much. I just kept building. This time, a new green corner, where Ellie taught kids how to grow herbs in recycled bottles. The HOA could block roads, but they couldn't block my imagination. And my daughter? She'd just drawn a whole new path. I used to think the height of this battle was when Victoria Maddox had that fence built straight through my land. But no, the real peak came when I got my court summons. It was a Monday morning. I was watering the rows of mustard greens Ellie had planted next to the creativity station when an unfamiliar car pulled up to the gate. A man in a gray suit stepped out, face cold as stone, holding out a large yellow envelope. "Mr. Jack Carter?" he asked. "That's me," I said, already feeling my pulse quicken. "You are the named defendant in a civil lawsuit filed by the Oak Ridge HOA. This is your court summons and a copy of the complaint. Have a good day." He turned on his heel and walked off so quickly I didn't even get a chance to ask. Sued for what? I opened the envelope. It was thick, a laundry list of absurd violations: operating an unauthorized business, disrupting neighborhood peace, blocking a shared access road, and the boldest accusation of all, illegally profiting from communal HOA property. I almost laughed out loud. They were suing me for using my own land they'd tried to fence off. Ellie was nearby, painting logos for Ellie's creative station with a group of kids. I didn't want to interrupt, so I waited until evening to tell her. She looked at me, furrowed her brow. "Are you scared, Dad?" I sighed. "Not scared, just tired. But I think you just gave me the reason not to back down." She smiled. "Can we ask other people to help us?" That question sparked a turning point no one saw coming. Ellie and her friends made a short video on her phone, telling the story of how the creativity station began, and ended with the question, should a child be sued for wanting to paint on her own land? We posted it to Facebook, then Nextdoor, then YouTube. Within 2 days, it had over 30,000 views. But more importantly, Oak Ridge neighbors began speaking up. The first to knock on our door was Mrs. Linda Prescott, a retired teacher who lived 2 doors down. "Jack," she said, handing me a tray of cookies. "I stayed quiet because I thought this wasn't my fight. But after watching Ellie's video, I realized staying silent is just another way of siding with injustice. That girl is braver than our entire HOA board combined." That evening, a group of neighbors gathered in my front yard, not to protest, but to sign a petition demanding the HOA drop the lawsuit and review their board's decision-making process. Within a week, I had over 70 signatures. My lawyer, Olivia, couldn't hide her excitement. "Jack, you just did something I haven't seen happen in a year. You turned a lawsuit into a community movement." The emergency HOA meeting that followed was the tensest one yet. I was given 10 minutes to speak, but I only needed 5. I told my story, plain and simple. A single dad reclaiming his family farm, being fenced out, threatened, and now sued. All for teaching his daughter how to create something meaningful from the land he owned. You don't have to agree with me, I concluded, but at least ask yourselves, are we living in a neighborhood or under some kind of fake aristocracy? When I left the room, something surprising happened. People clapped, not everyone, but enough that Victoria's face turned pale. A few days later, the HOA sent a letter offering an out-of-court settlement. They dropped the lawsuit if I agreed, to cease unauthorized commercial activities and remove all signage. I countered with one clause. I'd agree if they publicly admitted fault for the unauthorized fence and promised never to do it again. Victoria refused. But this time, no one on the board backed her. Harold Mitchell, HOA Vice President, sent me a written apology himself. "Mr. Carter," he wrote, "we were wrong, not just legally, but morally. Thank you and Ellie for reminding us that. A community isn't built on rules, it's built on people. I didn't retaliate, I didn't counter. I simply took down the toll road sign and replaced it with a new one, hand-painted by Ellie. Welcome to Ellie's Creativity Station. Admission free. Ideas are priceless." And I realized something. The greatest victory doesn't always happen in a courtroom. Sometimes it's when you make a neighborhood stop being afraid and start finding its voice. I still remember that late afternoon near the end of the month, when Ellie and I sat beside the wooden fence the HOA had once erected like a declaration of occupation. That fence was now partially removed, replaced by a small oak gate that Ellie and I had built together. Hanging above it was a wooden sign carved with Ellie's scribbled handwriting. "Welcome to the Creativity Station." It wasn't some fancy arts center. Just a few picnic tables, buckets of paint, paper, crayons, and above all, open space where kids could do what they loved. Funny thing is, the original idea of charging the HOA to cross my land, what started as a satisfying counterattack, became the catalyst for something far greater, and the HOA, after losing the lawsuit, they quietly backed off. No more threatening letters, no more veiled meetings, no more Victoria Maddox showing up with her trademark scowl. Of course, she still lived in that luxury house up on the hill. Still drove her brand new Range Rover. Still wore oversized sunglasses as if to hide her entire face. But something in her walk had changed. Gone was the commanding stride of someone in power. All that remained was the weary shadow of someone realizing she couldn't manipulate everything with a rule book. I remember the day the court officially ruled that the HOA had no authority to impose rules or fees on private land outside its original development zone, especially after they had violated the law by erecting a fence without legal jurisdiction. In that moment, I didn't jump for joy. I just felt relief. Ellie had gotten used to strangers dropping by every weekend. Some days, it was neighborhood kids bringing their drawings to show off. Other days, an elderly couple would stop by with homemade sweets. Sometimes a young man in gardening overalls would come help Ellie plant more flower beds. I never imagined I'd become the community landkeeper. When this all began, I just wanted to reclaim the right to access the land I'd been paying taxes on for years. But now, watching Ellie dash around the Creativity Station, hair flying, hands covered in paint, rambling on about her comic book idea featuring a Spanish-speaking unicorn, I realized this wasn't just my story anymore. The community had changed. Not because I won a court case, but because people saw the value of unity and truth. One day, while cleaning out the garage, I found the old sign, "Property managed by HOA. Do not enter without authorization." The lettering faded, but the message still reeked of arrogance. I chuckled, flipped it upside down, and hung it behind the Creativity Station as a tongue-in-cheek reminder. Beneath it, I painted. This sign used to symbolize control. Now it's just decoration for imagination. Whenever someone asked about the lawsuit, I'd just smile and say, "I didn't win by taking land back. I won by creating a place worth living in." It was a simple sentence, but it made a lot of people nod. A week after things had settled, Victoria unexpectedly showed up at the gate of the Creativity Station. She came alone. No sunglasses. Her face was pale but proud, like someone walking into a battlefield one last time. "I'm not here to apologize," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "I came because I saw a drawing my granddaughter made. It had your girl in it. She called Ellie her friend." I stayed silent. "My granddaughter has never called anyone in this neighborhood her friend," she continued. I forgot. What really matters when you live in a community. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. Then Ellie came running up and saw Victoria. She stopped, tilted her head, and asked, "Are you the lady who put a fence in front of our house?" I cleared my throat, ready to jump in. But Victoria bent down to meet Ellie at eye level and said, "Yes, and I think I'm learning how to fix that. Can you show me how to draw a flying unicorn?" Ellie nodded so fast she nearly toppled over. I stood there watching the two of them, one child holding a colored pencil, one adult shedding the last layer of power. I don't know how much Victoria will change, but I do know something had already shifted. And if someone were to ask me, "What did you teach your daughter from all this?" I'd say, That sometimes instead of tearing down fences, you build a bridge with imagination, courage, and a bucket of paint. I didn't need to win a lawsuit to feel victorious. I just needed to see Ellie laughing in her little workshop on the farm, a space full of colors, canvases, and ideas bigger than the Texas sky. The HOA could build fences, but I built a future. And that future doesn't lie behind a locked gate. It lives in every stroke Ellie paints onto her. Dream. They tried to make me back down, but I'm a father, and a real father doesn't back down. He moves forward for the things worth fighting for.